This is More Than Before with Nathan Cook.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another great episode. I'm really excited for our guest today. He truly is an amazing guy. I love this guy. He was first team academic All-American in college at the NAIA level. He was the CCC Scholar Athlete of the Year, honorable mentions All-American basketball. Needless to say, this guy is a really awesome basketball player. He's also really tall, 6'6". That's why we had to do this virtually, because I felt small in his presence. But he truly is an awesome guy. He lives up to how big he is in life. He's a big guy. Lives big, meaning, needless to say, he is really awesome. I love him. We've gotten to work together in the past, and I've loved how he dedicates himself to growing himself, and being all that he is created to be. So I'm really excited to welcome my brother on today, Michael Loomis. How are you today, brother?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I feel honored to be on the Nathan Cook podcast. So it's a great day for me.
It's been a while working towards this, getting it off the ground. And, there's been so many great interactions I've had over my coaching career. And, you've been one of those people who I've just had such a joy to work with one-on-one. And there were times when we were working together, I was like, man, this guy, he's got some incredible talent. I can't wait to see what happens. And then all of a sudden you're leaving me, you're, moving to different states. And you're like, you told me to quit my job. And I'm like, no, I did not tell you to quit your job. But, I have loved watching you grow, and you truly are a student of life. You love to grow. I want to take it way back to when you first were growing up. I think what's interesting, what I think most people probably don't know, but you were born in Nairobi. You were not born here in the States. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I don't know if you can tell by looking at me, but I was born in Nairobi, Kenya. And I joke because I'm one of the
blonde hair,
people.
Blue eyes, really chiseled, good looking guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Can tell from Nairobi. But yeah, my dad, before my parents got married, was a missionary doctor for years. And so when my parents got married, they decided to, actually a year before I was born, they went to Kenya, and then I was born halfway through. So I spent my first year of my life growing up in Nairobi, Kenya.
Do you remember obviously you were super young, probably don't remember much, but do you ever look back on some of those photos and go, wow, I can't believe, did your parents take photos of you when you were in Kenya?
There's some pictures. Yeah. I can imagine looking where, I forget what it's called, where you look where all the babies are born and I'm just over there. People are like, who is this baby? But sometimes I think I have this memory, but I don't even think you have memories by the first 11 months. So it's probably a dream that I had, but no, I don't remember anything, but it's fun to look at the pictures.
Yeah, it is. Well, I think actually you do have those memories from, even science is showing right now that that infants in the womb have memories, and they can recall arguments that their parents have had when they're in the mother's womb. So I think it's very possible that you have those memories. So I think that's kind of cool. Yeah. Now, where did you actually grow up in your younger years then?
Yeah, so we spent a little time hopping around. So lived in Kenya till I was a year old, and then we spent a little time in Chicago, but we settled in Portland, Oregon. My grandpa had kind of settled up here. He ended playing with the Portland Trailblazers and then went into being an orthodontist. And so, just wanting to be near family, we settled in Portland. So I grew up in the Portland metropolitan area for, until I went off to college.
Wow, that's really cool. So growing up, give us a little bit of an idea. Who were you as a kid? Were you the outgoing, rambunctious, awesome, chiseled, six-pack child? I don't know. I don't think, kids have six packs. At least they shouldn't have six packs.
Yeah, it's interesting looking back, and I think in college I got really interested of why I am the way that I am. And so you can kind of look back in hindsight of who I was. And, I wasn't always, there's kind of two parts to me where I was this really focused person, especially when it came to sports. I was kind of quiet a little bit until I got to know people, but I was just really focused on sports. So if I was there, I was locked in on sports. But outside of that, honestly, I've always had a little pushback against authority. I don't know what it is about me, but I was always getting in trouble growing up. So I actually almost got thrown out of my junior high just because I was consistently getting in trouble. I had a hard time concentrating, and the teachers had a hard time with me. So, there's kind of two parts of me. There was kind of and part of it's, you do what you see growing up. And so, when it came to some of the parental dynamics, like there was some anxiety there was some social trepidation. So you pick some of that up. So I had a little bit of that growing up, but also I've always been more extroverted and expressive. And so there was like a kind of a combination of that, but I was a little bit of a troublemaker. If it had if there wasn't something to do with basketball or a sport or a ball, I didn't have much interest, but I was smart enough to get by in school. So it was kind of an interesting combination.
I mean, basketball was a pretty big thing in your world growing up. I feel like, I mean, it goes back even in your history with your grandfather, right? Because, your grandfather, who recently just passed, he actually played in the NBA. He was an all-star for the Baltimore Bullets and then the Detroit Pistons. And then you were just saying that he also played for the Blazers, and he was Rookie of the Year in 1963. And then he also won a gold medal in 1960 for the Olympics in Rome. So like, for you growing up, like you saw your grandfather, I would imagine, and were like, oh my gosh, like he plays basketball. I want to play basketball like he did. Did you feel that pressure growing up? Like you wanted to be great, just like him in playing that sport?
Yeah. I mean, my grandpa, he was my hero. So he passed less than a couple weeks ago. And so, he had an unbelievable career, and he was almost a more successful orthodontist afterwards, which is unbelievable. But, my dad played at Harvard and Stanford. He played basketball at the Division I level. My mom played Division I volleyball at Oregon. So sports was just in our family. Like it was bound to happen. And so every gift I had growing up was basketball and hoop and something sports related. Honestly, I think because it was my grandpa, I think I didn't feel as much of the pressure. I saw it as, you see someone do something, oh, my grandpa accomplished this. So it was just in my mind that like, that's what I want to do. And I feel like I can get to that level. So that was kind of my whole mindset growing up I just looked up to him and was grateful to have an influence like that in my life to help me with my basketball game. Like he was always giving me little, tidbits of how to improve my game. But I think part of it also was my dad had a little bit more of a stern father. And so I think he could have been a little bit more pushed me a little more growing up, but he kind of had more of a laid back, approach to my discipline to sports. And so I think it took me a while to take ownership of that myself, but because because of his father, he didn't want to be like that to me. And so, I didn't feel the pressure. I thought it was a great opportunity, and I was thankful to have him as a grandpa. So, but yeah, everything was sports related. And I think partly because of him and just that influence.
Well, and you've had some incredible mentors in your life, your grandfather being one of those. Who have been some of the other major influencers in your life as you've grown up? People who have really spoken into your life, because I would imagine, especially in the sports world, I think there are coaches that come into our life that really challenge us, that force us to really like think bigger than where we are. I'm curious, who are some of those mentors for you growing up that kind of helped to shape who you are?
Yeah, I've said this a few times. When I look back on my life, like we had some tough family stuff that I went through, but it's kind of unbelievable how God provided for me and the people that I had in my life. So there's a lot of ways I think things could have gone a lot differently in my life just due to, pain that I had personally, and ways to try to mitigate that and find out your identity and all those type of things. But it's pretty unbelievable. Like I look back to growing up, there was different people in my church, right, who spoke into me, or teachers that just said a word. Like even when I was getting in trouble a lot in junior high, there just little comments like this always stuck with me, where the vice principal of the school was like, Michael is a natural leader, but he's just leading people in the wrong direction. And so, for me, I was like, oh, wow, he sees me as a natural leader. Like, that's really cool. And then, I get into AAU travel basketball, right? And my coach, Jason Fawcett and Chris Rivers and Jeremy Nesbitt, like they created an environment for me to really understand discipline and hard work. And, there was people that came and just spoke in my school. It was a pastor that made a big difference in my life, where people, friends, parents have turned into second parents for me, but I look at every single step in my life where a big decision had to happen, even connecting with you. Like God just consistently put people in my life to speak positive words. And, I think I feel incredibly blessed. I think I was also open to those people being in my life, and I was always trying to learn from other people and insight. So I think it was both and. But yeah, I mean, as coaches, just family, friends of family members, other family members, coaches, teachers that I feel, really invested into me. And I think without that, my life would have looked a lot different. So I'm very blessed for that.
You talk about trials, and I think we all have trials, and I've talked about this a number of times on the podcast so far, but I think the trials that we have in our life, these crucible moments in our life, truly do help us to refine who we are. And it kind of helps us to question who are we going to be as we move forward, whether that's at the beginning of a trial or at the end of a trial, of saying, I never again want this to happen. I want this to be different, whether that's in the way that you were raised or the experiences that you had, or even yourself of just going, I didn't handle this situation very well. I want to do this differently the next time. You talked a little bit about some of the trials that you had growing up. What were some of those experiences, some of those crucible moments that you experienced that you had to grow through in order to become the guy that you are today?
Yeah, I think one part, I wish at the time I saw them as that. In hindsight, they led to that growth. But for years, with some family stuff I went through, it was just pain, resentment, lack of forgiveness. And so, long story short, was due to some physical, illness, and then also my uncle passing, who was my mom's brother. Like she had fibromyalgia. She had a lot of physical conditions, but also kind of fell into a deep depression, was an alcoholic. There was a lot of things going on where she just wasn't very present. My dad dealing with that wasn't very present at all. And so, it was actually really tough. There was one moment where, my mom basically tried to take her life, called it off. Right. But I remember being in the room. My dad told me to go up in there, and I'm kind of looking at her. Right. And now it's like she's doing so much better. Like God's been really good. And so I say this from a place of like, she's no longer there, which is awesome. Yeah. But I remember looking at her and just this like pity and just like disgust of like, what are you doing? But there was this sense of throughout that whole process, I love the saying, you always act out who you believe you are. And through your life, when you're not even, especially when you're younger, not aware of it, you start developing these beliefs about yourself. So all these things happening through my life was that, I was unlovable. I didn't know that was the lie, but I thought I was unlovable. And so, you try to cope with that. You try to perform and achieve. And so much of my life was that. But I think because of all these things that we went through, like I didn't have that lovey family life I had growing up. I looked to other families and just said, oh man, I wish I had that. Now in hindsight, when I look at so much of, I try to treat every aspect of my life very intentionally. And I honestly don't think I'm the person I am today without that, because I've seen in essence parts of what I don't want. And it hurt a lot. Like there was a lot of pain there, growing up of, why is this happening to me? I want this other thing. And I think because of that pain, I've heard this where you're either motivated to change for a dream or a goal or because of pain. Right. And so I think the way that I'm very intentional about, or try to be intentional about relationships and dating and how I want to eventually have a family, I don't think that happens without that. And so, and also coming out of a lot of that pain is I tried to channel that into achievement, right? So basketball, school, whatever I did, usually from high school on, I didn't know that's what I was trying to achieve. Like I was doing a lot of things and achieving, but it just didn't do anything for me. There was the next thing. And so, but the thing is, even through that process, and I don't think I needed that to become the person. I think God would have molded me, but part of it is there was skills and discipline and habits that I developed through those hard times that now God's using for good, that I developed through that hard time. So I think, yeah, it's just made me really intentional of what I want, what I don't want. And now I look back, as weird as it is to say, I'm thankful for it. Like part of me is, because now I have a great story to relate to people of where I was and how God got me to here now. So, but it wasn't easy. But hopefully our goal is, especially from that, of how can you, grow from it and make different decisions moving forward.
That's one of the things that I've really, even though I've come later on in your journey within growth of getting to know you and seeing you grow as a man, like it's been really fascinating to see you truly own your circumstances and where you are. Like that's one of the things that I've really appreciated of you, is you look at a circumstance and you say, how can I do things differently? What can I do differently? And when Michael talks about being intentional, he is highly intentional. There are people that say that they're intentional. Michael's very intentional in every aspect that he's living his life, from the type of work that he's doing to his relationships to, even moving out to where you are now, which we're going to get to that in a brief moment, because I think it's a real testament of kind of your journey. But I think what's really fascinating is this piece that we've talked about in the before about achievement, and how achievement was kind of identity for you. Is if you weren't achieving, you weren't doing well. And so you have this career, this basketball career, where you're achieving and you get out of it. And then all of a sudden you're challenged. You're faced with a challenge of, now you need to go get a job. Now you got to do something with your life. For you, I remember you talking, oh, I want to go into the NBA. NBA is the thing. Like, that's where I want to go. And I remember hearing that going, yeah, like, you have everything. You could do that. Is that where you're supposed to be going? And there was kind of this challenge in that season of life where you started to wrestle with this idea of achievement. Because at the time you were also working at a job that you did not like, selling things that you had no interest in selling. How did you get to that place of selling, being a salesperson, selling something that you absolutely hate, and trying to wrestle with, man, who do I want to be as I move forward in life? What brought you to that place?
So there's a little before how it even got there was during like my senior year of college. So a lot of my friends had graduated. I had redshirted, so I had an extra year. And I went into this year. It was interesting in wherever this came from or how it came to be. But I was sitting in my chair one day in the morning. I wanted to be more intentional about reading and growing. I had that time without friends. And so I was praying, and I felt written across my eyes, change the world. Whatever that means, like, that's what I took and that's what I read. And so instantly I just kind of thought about how I wasn't the type of person that could make that big of a difference at that time. Like, I knew there was things I needed to grow in. So I got really intentional about growth. And I think part of that, once I did that, the enemy got a little alerted, right? Of, hey, Michael's trying to become all that God's created him to be. And so long story short, I had some health issues that I went through, or thought they were health issues. And I thought it was going to be this autoimmune condition. And so it kind of spiked this anxiety and OCD-like behavior. And so I just kind of got into this like method of thinking. It was very OCD-like and just checking, and I didn't know how to handle all these thoughts. And it kind of got to this point in my life where I tried to achieve, run from pain, all these type of things. And it finally kind of just spearheaded in one moment where on one hand, I was having all this success as a basketball player, academically, like you would look at him like he has it all together. And I talked to people who are like, yeah, you looked like you had it all together, but inside I was really struggling, and I was honestly pretty scared. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, there was times where even before games, like I was drinking half a bottle of ZQL and taking Dramamine, and I couldn't sleep. Like I was at this point of just kind of like breaking point for myself. And so the year ended. I finally talked to my parents, told them, let them know what was going on, started seeing a therapist. But that's when I came to this idea of neuroplasticity, where I had a very fixed mindset. I thought you kind of are who you are, the cards that were dealt you, good or bad luck. And then I understood this idea of neuroplasticity, and it changed my life because there's a lot of things I wanted to overcome or change about myself. I didn't know how. And so I started to get into this, and I kind of do everything all or nothing. Like if I'm doing it, I'm doing it. If not, like I don't care about it. And so basically how I got into sales was I started, kind of working with a network marketing company and getting outside my comfort zone that way, and, making connections and having hard conversations and meeting people. And that was really uncomfortable. But also I saw how this fear of failure had really held me back in life, and this fear of rejection. Mm. And so I was doing that where that's very rejection based and people judging you. But then also, I had a friend who was working at Xerox, which loved the company. I just didn't care that much about copiers, but I heard if you could sell a copier, you could sell anything. And so I learned about how you need to face your fears, feel the emotion, move through it. It's like this exposure and response. And so I just realized what I learned kind of doing some anxiety treatment, right? Okay, I can do this with everything in my life. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to face this rejection head on. I'm going to go into the hardest part of sales, which is, I believe, was copier sales. You could also say payroll, but it's like, I'm going to try to sell copiers. And so I had no idea what I was doing, but it wasn't even like the idea of the money that comes with sales. I think that's why a lot of people get into it. It was more so the person I wanted to become by doing sales. I knew if I could succeed as a salesman, I had to learn how to communicate. I would have to learn how to connect. I would have to learn how to face fear and rejection over and over and over again. And looking back at my life, I saw how that held me back. So that's why I ended up working in sales. To be completely honest with you, was just to try to grow at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, when you say that you wanted to become this person through the sales process of learning how to do sales, what was it specifically about that salesperson that, like, I think we all have the identity of that person in mind of, like, they're the kind of, they're really good at speaking. They're really good at being confident in whatever it is that they're selling. What was it about the sales kind of career that you wanted personally? Like, what was that identity that you saw and you said, man, like, I wish I had that. I want to have that kind of identity. What was that exactly?
I think it was just facing fear head on and just being okay with rejection and things not going your way. Like the idea of someone walking into an office where someone doesn't want to talk to you, and you walk up to that person and you have this hard conversation of trying to build rapport to schedule a meeting. Like, I think part of it was that, like, I just saw, I had a strong desire to be liked by people. And I think through family growing up, it then turned into, I tried to attain love. Right. And so I think the way I tried to do that was trying to get people to like me. And if they like me and admire me, then maybe that subconsciously, I didn't know this was going on, but maybe then I'll be loved. And so I started to see how I'd been doing that, how it had kind of held me back. And I was like, one of the best ways is to kind of do that exposure of people not liking you. And regardless of you feel like you're doing something good, right? I thought was sales and outbound sales and making calls. Like, if you thought about, this idea of exposure therapy, just facing your fears is what it is. And just being okay with being in that situation. Making 40, 50, 60 calls per day, whether in person or over the phone, was like a very drastic way to just throw myself into the fire. And so I think it was just that person that was just really confident in themselves. I think ultimately it was that confidence and just being settled and grounded, like, kind of regardless of what people thought about me.
I want to go back to this idea of neuroplasticity, because I think it's kind of a buzzword recently. We're hearing a lot about neuroplasticity. It's been around for a while, but I'm curious, what was the piece about the neuroplasticity piece that stuck out to you? Neuroplasticity meaning, like, your ability to change the way that you think, the way that you absorb information, the way, like, when I was growing up, I don't know if you were ever like this. When I was growing up, I thought I was the worst reader in the world. I suck at reading. I can't remember things. I'm just not good at reading. And so I trained myself to think that way. And so when I would read, I would suck at reading. I would get distracted by the dog, or the sun would be shining. I'd be running outside, right? And so our neuroplasticity really is that ability to change our mind, to change the way that we think, but not just the way that we think, but literally the structures of our mind. We can change our brain. Tell us a little bit about that process for you of going through that neuroplasticity. Why did that inspire you to want to change and want to read?
I think, again, it was that pain that I'd felt a lot of my life. Was there was just things I just didn't like about myself that I didn't know how to change, or I didn't know I could change, right? Where maybe part of how I was raised, but, I honestly didn't have a great work ethic for a long time in my life. I would hit hard things and quit, or, even relationally, like, I had a lot of fears around relationships just due to family upbringing and some stuff that I went through. And so I couldn't seem to figure that out. Like, I just had a lot of anxiety around relationships and didn't know why. And so I don't know. It's kind of interesting. I don't know why. Maybe just because of the people that have been in my life, but I felt like I was put on this earth to do something. And now I understand it 10 years later, 5 years later, that, something grand and great could just be having a family. But I've always felt like I was created to do something. And I always wanted to do that. I don't know. Something awoke within me of, man, I just really want to be that person. And I didn't know how to get there. And so because of that, just like hitting my head against a wall and so many different things in my life. And, especially on the basketball court, like, there were certain things that would hold me back mentally, and I couldn't figure out why. Like, why sometimes do I lack confidence in big moments, or there's like things like that, or why can't I just get up to play every single game? Like, there's a lot of things because I wanted to be great, but sometimes my mind would get in the way. And so I think once I finally found out that, hey, you can change some of these things, and you can, break generational patterns that I had seen that kind of freaked me out. once I realized that because of the pain, I was like, I thought at the time, this was the avenue to be who I was supposed to be, which I found out, isn't, right. Ultimately, that's what Jesus has done for us. But, it was this really big revelation of, I now have some sort of vehicle to try to get there. And that was really exciting for me. And once that clicked, I just like dove head on into it.
I love that. I really love the way that you live life now. Like, you look at challenges and you're excited to meet those challenges, no matter what it is that you do. Like, I remember when we were talking earlier, you've been in Tennessee. How long have you been in Tennessee for now?
Moved here middle of September last year.
Okay. So about a year now that you've been in Tennessee. And it was funny because that journey to get there was really interesting to me, because you felt like you were supposed to leave Oregon. Like, you grew up in Oregon. This is your home. This is where you've been your entire life. And now all of a sudden you're considering leaving. In fact, it's not even a consideration of leaving. You're going to leave, and you don't know anyone. You have no network out there. There's no connections, and you're just gonna go out there and start something new in a brand new industry. What gave you the courage to step out like that? Because I think a lot of people want to step out, but they're so comfortable with where they are. The fear of wanting to do something that maybe they're not going to be good at. Like, how did you take that challenge and move forward?
Yeah, it was an interesting process. I think partly, so I got to a point where I was completely burnt out. Like, I was doing some business stuff on the side. I was working at Xerox. I was basically, from the time woke up at 6:40 in the morning till 9-10 later at night, I was doing something productive. Right. And I think over time, like, I just got super burnt out. And because God had put certain goals and dreams on my heart that I wanted to achieve, and I saw an avenue to do it. And I was, I thought this was it. Right. But then I started to learn how God also calls us to rest and peace and trust. And so eventually I got to a point where I went through a breakup, and I was just mentally and physically everything exhausted and burnt out. And I just decided, you know what, God, I've tried to do this on my own. I'm tired. Like, I now want to be open to where you want to lead in my life, because, I've always been open to God speaking into my life. Like, I remember, and it still sticks in my head, where I was still kind of going through some stress, anxiety, didn't know what I wanted to do. And I went up at church for prayer. They called people up for prayer. And I went through a point where I was like, that's me. And so I started just going up. But someone prayed over me and said, God wants to bring you to a state of being, just being you, not doing. And then I want to operate in your life from there. And I think during that time, like, I truly, even though I understood that the lie I was living from was that I was unlovable, I still didn't know what it felt like to be loved, because my whole life I'd been achieving, going. I didn't allow myself to be loved for being me. So it starts at the beginning of COVID, which was a blessing because things weren't as busy at that time. And so I quit doing everything outside of my job. I just rested. I was sleeping 10 hours a night. And through that process of just kind of being, like, all of a sudden it wasn't like this magical moment. I just realized, you know what? I'm loved. Like, the baseline level of my identity is that I am loved by my Heavenly Father. Like, He loves me, and I could sit on this log for the rest of my life. That's not going to change the amount of love that I have, and that is mine. And so that was pretty transformational for me. And then from there, I was like, you know what? I'm loved. Okay, God, just what's next? What's the next thing in front of me? And it never was, here's this grand scheme of things. Like, I had no idea quitting my job would lead to me being in Nashville, Tennessee in 2022. Like, had no idea. But what happened was I just started saying yes to the thing in front of me. Like, I don't know, maybe it's because I think part of it's I ask God for something, and I expect because He says so, He's going to let me know or lead me in that direction. I think that's part of it, is like trusting God's actually going to do what He says He's going to do.
Yeah.
And so I just asked, lead me. And so it was just things in front of me where I randomly get connected, or adjunct professor I had in college who I never met in person messages me on LinkedIn, asks what I'm doing. I say I've been interested in life coaching, trying to figure out what I want to do. Oh, I know a life coach. His name's Nathan Cook. Let me connect you with him. And then you connect and you say, you know what, maybe you should go through coaching to see if you want to be a coach. So we start coaching. And so during this time, I'm training to go try and play basketball overseas. And so that was what I thought I was going to do. I've stopped feeling less at home in Portland. So I was like, okay, maybe it's basketball. He's preparing me to go play basketball. But even then it was like, God's like, hey, invest in training and trying to go play overseas. But it never, like, I never felt that the end product was going to be me playing overseas. I thought maybe, but I was like, just start. So I start training, paying $1,000 a month for training that I didn't have a ton of extra income at the time. But I said yes. I feel like that's what God wanted me to do. And that got me back into nutrition and health, which I love. And then I'm working with you and I'm kind of talking about, hey, I kind of want to change. I'm not sure if I'm super passionate about copier sales, right? And you tell me to go look for something. And now I come across my company now, right? So I said yes to that. I apply for this job. It sounds really cool. I say yes to that. I get accepted. And because of that, I'm now in a remote capacity and where I'm starting to think about moving. My lease was ending with my buddy at the house. And because I'd said all these yeses that I feel like God had put in front of me, and I was just open to, I think there was a peace on certain decisions and anxiety on other ones. So I just try to go with the peaceful one.
Yeah.
And my buddy says Nashville. He says, what about Nashville? Had never been to Nashville. Even until I started driving out here, I didn't realize how far east it was, which is so funny. I looked at the map and I'm like, this is actually like the East Coast. But yeah, he said Nashville. And then, I said, God, make it obvious. Like, make it obvious where you want me. And it was just thing after thing. It was daily. Something popped up. This popped up. This popped up of Nashville, 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 Nashville. And it didn't make any sense, but I was at peace about it. And it was even a year. I went through some health complications. It was a year until I decided to when I went. I don't think people believed me, but I didn't even feel like I had to visit. I feel like that's where God wanted me. I said, God, if you want me out there, make it easy. Roommate, living situation. I connected with a guy on Facebook. He reached out. He found the apartment. He did everything. I just applied, and I packed up my car and drove out. So, I think part of it is one, relinquishing control. I think I was heading down a path that, while I saw results that I feel like God had put on my heart that were important to me, like deep down didn't think that was my path, but I was scared to kind of let go of control because I didn't know what was next. It was the first time in my life I didn't have that next step of, high school, basketball, college, basketball, work, right? I didn't know what was next. And so I just gave that up. And then I trusted God was going to lead me. I just said small yeses. And then those small yeses built trust to then say yes to coming to Nashville, where it didn't make sense. But there was like a 2-year process leading up to that. So, I think my tolerance went up a little bit.
Well, I love how it started off with something and it was nurtured and you continued to believe that was in the cards, that you were called to go somewhere. I think we all have a feeling that maybe we're supposed to be somewhere else. That doesn't necessarily mean that you sell everything and then you pack up and you leave immediately, right? Sometimes like even with me and my wife, there's been a moment where we talk and we say, you know what, I feel like we're not supposed to be in Oregon, but we're in Oregon for right now. Like, I don't know when that could be 60 years from now where God's like, oh, by the way, you're going over here. Ooh, I don't know what that is, but it's being open. You've said that a few times, of being open to the possibility, being open to moving somewhere. It's funny because when you talk about, telling people, yeah, I think I'm going to Nashville. I'm going to go to Nashville. I remember you telling me that you're going to go to Nashville. And I don't think we probably talked for maybe like 4 or 5 months or 6 months after that. And I messaged you and I was like, hey man, like, are you in Nashville now? And you're like, oh no, I'm not heading. I'm actually getting ready to leave like in like a month or two. And I was like, hey, I wanted to get coffee with you or tea or whatever. Like, let's get together. I want to hear what's going on before you leave. And it's funny because we met just shortly before you went off on this journey, this kind of this new journey to a new place with a new career, with all, like, everything is brand new. And it's been really cool to see that based off of your trust. I think there's something about this of, I think it's good for us to have goals. I think there's also this really important thing for us to go to God and say, God, is this of you? Or is this just me wanting to be selfish? Like I would say, and if I'm wrong, I think maybe your initial goal was like, hey God, like, let's get back to the NBA. Let's go. Like, I'm gonna go play overseas. And then there was a moment of like, okay, God, like, is that actually of you? And God's like, yeah, I just want you to go get training. I want you to go get better. I want you to develop yourself. I want you to meet some people. Like, just go. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of it's kind of this weird push and pull of like, you want to have the dreams, you want to have the goals, but you want to put them in God's hands and say, God, is this really what you want? And, I know you've heard this from me. You've heard me say this, that, you got to put those goals that you want, and you got to put them in the furnace of God. right? We've got the, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Hananiah, Azariah, Mishael, putting those things in the fiery furnace and saying, okay, God, like, is this what I'm supposed to have? And over, every single time, you're just doing that so that you can get clarity of, is this something that is of you that God has put in you? Like what you said, I think every single person in their life is meant to do something big. Big is relative though.
Yeah.
For you listening right now, relative, like big might be raising your kids. It might be getting married. It might be buying your first house, having your first house in your family lineage, right? It could be any number of things. It could be speaking into, the lives of millions of people on a podcast, or having, a platform to speak from. There are so many different dreams that are out there. Stop worrying about the bigness of it, because the bigness of it is relative. It's just a matter of taking that step forward and realizing that you were called to do something. You've talked a lot about of investment, like you've invested in classes and courses and coaches and therapy and all kinds of things. How has the investment in yourself paid dividends? Because a lot of people, when they think about investing in themselves, I think you'll capture this. A lot of people, when they invest in a product, they say this product is what's going to make me more valuable. When in actuality, it's the product that's going to unlock something inside of you that makes you more valuable. It's not about the product itself, right? You could pay thousands of dollars for a product and it doesn't make you any better, but you could pay $5 for a product or $10,000 for a product. And all of a sudden you start living more like you were made to be. How has the investment in products and coaching and all these different aspects in your life, how have investments played a dividend when it comes to your own personal growth?
I think part of that, looking back, was partly how I was raised. Family has pros and cons. Like, there were some cons that I had to go through, but my parents did an unbelievable job of, hey, I have this goal of playing basketball or growing as a person, where my dad, for the most part, was always quick to say yes. Like, whether that was baseball tryouts or training, he would drive me 45 minutes 3 times a week after work, or if it was, basketball training or training for the SATs, like, they always said yes. And I guess I saw the output of that and the benefit. And so, I'm incredibly grateful for that. Like, I believe my parents believed in me and they invested into me. And so then when I start into the professional world, like, I just felt that in order for me to get to certain places, I just needed to acquire the right skills or learn the right thing or do this to kind of get there. Like, cause I'd seen that throughout most of my life, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. But I think the biggest scary thing, and it was still scary, right? There's times where I felt, and it's all been relative to cost, right? You start making more money, it seems different. But when I first started working with you, I was like, man, like, do I want to pay that monthly while I'm also training to play basketball? Like, I'm not really going to be saving any sort of money. But again, it was that slow of trusting God. Like, I feel like he brought these things into my life. So I don't know what that outcome is. I'm going to say yes. And I think that's the scary part is, one, it's part of it comes from the stem of, do you believe you're worthy enough? Do you believe you're worth having this sort of investment into yourself and it's actually going to pay out, right? Part of it's a worthiness thing, but also it's, in essence, there's only been you. Like, there's only been one me, and there will always be one me. So I don't know what the trajectory of my life is. Like, even investing in the stock market, you're told, hey, over time, highs and lows, it's going to go up. So you inherently know, okay, I'm going to trust what all these experts have said about this one thing. But with yourself, like, you don't know what that is. Like, me investing in myself, like, that could be a dud. Like, that's what you tell yourself. Me investing in this could be a dud. It might not work out. I lost money. I could have invested that, but I truly think it's through that process of investing in myself, your perspective changes. So whether that was investing in training that got me back into my health and fitness, and that got me into my job, or working with you gave me different perspective and intentionality to then take a new job and get outside my comfort zone. You get new perspective, right? And so I think that's the biggest thing is you're trying to make decisions about a future self that you're not that future self yet. And so it's investing in yourself within reason of, you know what, I'm just going to trust me going through this. I'm going to be a new and different type of person, and if this is within financial reason to some degree, I'm going to say yes. But also for me, it was trusting in God that he was leading me. But Yeah, I'm incredibly grateful. Every single time, it's so funny, whether that's in eating right and trying to buy the right types of food or supplementation or coaching or buying a house or whatever it was, I was always nervous. And then I'm like, man, I need to try to remember the benefit of this when I face that next investment I want to make, but I'm scared to financially because, you have this record of it working out. But yeah, it's who you become. Like, yeah, a product could help or not. But I think it's that whole journey of just choosing to invest in yourself. Like, you're worth it. And I think that's kind of the biggest thing I've learned, but that and the change of perspective.
Well, I love what you say about outcome. Like I think so many times when we talk about investments, when we talk about investing in ourselves, we think about, I don't know about you, but sometimes I look at it and I say, you know what, if I do this, am I going to get a financial return from this? And I think a lot of people focus on the financial return, right? Like the common question that I'll get with someone who's working with me as a coach is that, what's my financial return going to be? I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I don't know what your financial return is, because your financial return is going to be based off of the type of financial actions that you make along the way as we're working together. And if you make a lot of really great financial traction and movement and you make those decisions, then yeah, you can make some really great money. But my goal ultimately when I'm working with someone is I'm always working to help you show up more in your life as the person you were created to be. Who are you supposed to be today versus who are you putting off right now? Like, are you not showing up as you? And there's something about this piece. I kind of want to come back to this piece that you were talking about earlier of the doing versus the being, because so many people are caught up in this doing mentality. Got to do more. Like I've got to get less sleep and I got to accomplish more in my life. And, we've even talked about the concept of a Sabbath, of having a day of rest, a day off where you take all of your work and you push the pause button. You say, you know what? I'm going to rest. I'm going to rest, rejuvenate, whether that's, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to read, I'm going to go take a longer nap, I'm going to go for a walk, I'm going to go fish, whatever that is, whatever that Sabbath piece is for you, where you can stop and rest. I'm curious, how do you go about being more versus doing more? Because so many people are focused on the doing, and I feel like they don't even know where to start when it comes to being, just showing up and being themselves.
It's different for everyone. I think everything comes from my faith and what I believe to be true about God in this world and who we are. And, I think you always act out who you believe you are. Like, you ultimately do. Like, if I'm unlovable, I'm ultimately going to act in a way in which I'm unlovable, right? And put myself in relationships where I'm unlovable. And so I think from what I've seen with a lot of people, sometimes it's just enter a period of rest. Like, I realized how I could attain more and achieve more in the short term by still working and progressing. But what was that long term? Like, what was that outcome? And so for me, I chose to enter a season of rest where, of course, I was still working, but outside of that, I wasn't reading any self-help books and I wasn't doing anything to try to just like become a better version of myself. There's a verse of, God said he's sanctifying those who have been sanctified. Like, so often, I think we just need to grow in what God says to be true about us. Like, I believe that if you believe in who Jesus is, who he was, what he accomplished, we're told we're a new creation. We're in Christ. You have the mind of Christ. You have a new heart. You're a new creation. You're holy, blameless, righteous. You're all of these things. And I wanted to operate from that. And so, I think I was trying to attain all of those type of things, not realizing I already had them in Christ. I just needed to believe it. So there was this spin where I was trying to do to be. I was trying to do all of these sorts of things, self-help, self-development, meditate to become this person, which I did make some sort of progress in that. So that's why I was scared to let go of it, because I didn't want to go back to where I was. But ultimately, like, that wasn't new life. I was just growing by myself. And so the biggest swing was I shifted to be to do, right? I'm going to grow in who God says I am, believe it. And while I just believed it by faith, I started to become this person without trying to grit my way through it. And so, it was just, I think part of it was just realizing I had everything I was working for in Christ. I have that, right? I'm going to believe that. And so now, even when I do these type of things to grow myself, which I'm probably more disciplined on that now than I was then, I'm no longer on this hamster wheel of trying to achieve and become this person. I know I am, but I try to structure my life in a way that, how can I help facilitate that? how can I help facilitate growing into these things that I already have, right? But yeah, the rest thing, I mean, we have one life, right? Like, I don't know. I wanted to enjoy life, a place of joy and peace. Like, I believe that was the way for truly thriving. And so I had to learn and put things into my life like, hey, I'm going to Sabbath, where this one day I'm not going to do anything outside of what brings me joy and is rest to me. Because when I do that, I realize I'm not in control and God is, and that the world goes on without me. Right. And so I think that's a humbling experience, but just trying to put things in my life of guardrails on my work. And even just, I tend to want to do and get so much done in a little amount of time. Hey, can I take this 5-minute break? Can I take this 15-minute break? Like making sure I'm really intentional of like putting my body in a place of facilitating what I have so that I am rested and joyful, and come from a place of just being and not what I'm just always trying to achieve all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I love you mentioned rest a couple of times within that, and so many people have a hard time with just resting. Like resting it's such an odd thing. I can't believe that we've gotten to a place in life where people have a hard time resting, right? And what is resting? I mean, resting of like put your phone down, turn off the TV, don't get sucked into a program, even just not even reading, just stopping and sitting in quiet and silence. It's funny because I have this practice. I'll go out and I do deep end fitness workouts and those kinds of things usually on a Monday evening. And when I go out, I drive out and I'll have music on, just kind of getting myself in the right headspace to be able to teach. And on my way home, though, most times I find myself sitting in silence. Like I want to fill the silence up. I want to push a song on, or listen to a podcast or something. Like, oh, I got to be growing. I got to do something. Yeah. And there's this moment where I stop and I turn everything off and I'm just driving. It's just me and the road. And, sometimes it's conversations with God and sometimes it's just sitting in silence. And it's so healthy for us to have those moments of rest. And I think, it's fascinating how hard it is for us to set time away to rest, even just like a break to eat. Like, if you're listening to this, you just challenge yourself. When was the last time you sat down and you had dinner and you weren't rushing off to something else? When was the last time that you actually sat and you spent actually 30 minutes eating your meal? Not 10 minutes, not like 10 minutes and then talking the rest of the time. When was the last time you actually sat and you enjoyed your food? When was the last time you sat and you enjoyed the company of your spouse or the company of a friend, or fill in the blank? I think so many of us are rushing so quickly that we lose the opportunities that are in front of us, right in front of us. So many times the doors are wide open to us and we're rushing past them because we're thinking, oh, we got to keep going. We got to keep doing. We got to move. At the end of the day, it doesn't mean that we're lazy. There's time for progression. There's time for doing things, but you do have to set time aside. Like even sleep is a big thing too. A lot of people don't get enough sleep. And it's amazing to me. There's moments where my wife and I, we look at each other and we say, it's time for you to go take a nap. What are you talking about? It's 2:00 in the afternoon. Like, no, you're going to go take a nap because we need you to be a happy person. There's something about getting the rest and making those decisions. And at the end of the day, there is a decision that has to be made. I've heard this, and you guys have heard this on the podcast so many times so far, is that everything is a choice. Everything is a decision. Love is a choice. Your joy is a choice. Peace is a choice. These are all things that are choices that you have to make. And it's not in the doing thing. It's an actual cleansing almost, right? Like how God cleanses us. Like, it's not a like, okay, well, he cleansed us, and so like 15 days from now we're going to be better. No, it's like it's an instant cleansing. Now, from this point forward, we have that neuroplasticity to say, this is who we are and this is how I'm going to operate. Michael, man, I have loved having you on the show and getting in to dive into your story. Like you truly have had such a transformation from youth all the way up to your basketball years, to selling, to where you are now. And, for someone who wants to reach out to you, to connect with you, maybe get encouragement, or maybe even find out a little bit what you're doing today within the nutraceuticals world, where could people go to find you? What would be the easiest way for someone to connect with you?
Yeah, and I think to speak on that really quick, like feel free. I'm just a normal dude, but I have most of the things that I'm good at now. I wasn't, and I think I've learned a lot through my story of, everything that I feel like I'm good at now, I was bad at, right? Whether that was confidence or fitness or my faith or, I was lived into unforgiveness with my mom for the longest time. Like I had anxiety and stress where I thought I was going to be a statistic, like all these things, like I've had to grow through and I've learned a lot through that. And so, obviously would love to help if anyone even wants to have a conversation with me. But, I think Instagram, my Instagram is mloom43. So MLOOM 43. I'm on Facebook, Michael Loomis, LinkedIn is a good one as well. So I think either of those are good options, but I feel I'm grateful, I've luckily have learned some things. And so, if I can help in any way, like feel free to reach out.
And that's what I love about this program is, we have people that come on who are bigger than life, that have some amazing things that they're doing. And you look at them, you're like, man, like, I don't think they would ever talk to me. And then you have other people that are like, man, I feel like that guy's just like me. Like, why is he on this show? And the point is that, and I'm not saying that about Michael. Michael's one of those people I think that is larger than life, that man, like he is doing things and he is making impact. But I think there's sometimes we look at people from a distance and we say, you know what, I think they're way beyond me, and I don't think they can help me. When at the end of the day, there are people that come into our lives. There's something that Michael spoke today that is only for you listening, and you got to take it. You got to walk away with it, and you got to say, how's my life going to change? How is it going to be different today because of what I heard? Because with everything that Michael has said today, there were points in his life where if he was not open to correction, open to learning, open to doors of opportunity, if he had missed those, he would be in a completely different space. He would be a completely different person. But because he was open to possibility, he was able to walk through. And for those of you listening, same thing is true for you too. I want to ask this one last question here for you, Michael, before we jump off. And it has to do around this idea of forgiveness, because you've talked a couple of times about forgiving your mom. I'm curious, what was that forgiveness like moving forward through that? Because a lot of people, it's so much easier to hold on to those things than to actually forgive someone. So I'm curious, what was that process like for you? And then on the backside of that, what did forgiveness do for you? How did it change you and open you up to what was next in your life?
Yeah. So when I was younger, like I told a little bit about the story with my mom, and there was a point where honestly, I thought this, I said it, that I thought my life would have been better if my mom would have passed away. That's how much anger I had, to the point of like not wanting someone to be on this earth. Like that's a pretty high level of just pain and lack of forgiveness. And it all started with, I realized how holding on to lack of forgiveness, where, this goal was to become who I was supposed to be, I knew it was going to affect me, right? I knew probably generational patterns would repeat. It would affect my marriage. It would affect my kids. Like that scared me because I saw how things had affected me. And so that's where the shift started to happen, but I didn't know how to forgive, right? I didn't know, like, okay, is it basically that I just try to say it? I didn't feel it. Right. And so, I can only speak to my story, but I remember I was reading this book. It was talking about generational trauma, and it said, picture the person, who has hurt you the most in front of you with all the things they've been through and the pain they'd been through. And, no one grew up wanting to hurt people or be this type of person, but through life, they became this person. I just started sobbing. Like I wholeheartedly started sobbing. I finally saw my mom for the human that she was. Right. And so that was a huge change for me, was just realizing that like everyone honestly is doing the best that they can. And you talk about this neuroplasticity, maybe their worldview is really messed up and they hurt you. Right. But I think one of the other main things that shifted was, I wholeheartedly believe, the scripture said so, and I just choose to believe it despite my feelings, that I have everything. Like I don't lack anything. And so there's this element that I've seen with a lack of wanting to forgive, of this person took something from me. And obviously there's higher levels of this that there needs to be more work and you still process it at the feelings level. But like this person took something from me. And so because of that, I'm mad at this person. Like my mom treated me, she went through this, and because of that, my childhood was this, and I'm this way. And so I'm mad at you and I'm pissed off at you because you couldn't be different for me. And then it hit me of, hey, no, you actually have everything. Like your mom didn't ultimately take anything from you because I gave it to you freely. And I was like, okay, so my essence of me being mad at this person disappeared. Like, if you didn't take anything from me, why am I mad at you? And so that was a huge thing. And even in just relationships in general, like you see in relationships, people there's always this bitterness, this fighting, this I get hurt, I feel offended. Hey, the only way someone can make you feel offended is because you feel like you lost anything or that you needed them to act a certain way towards you for you to feel a certain way. That's a lie. Like, you don't need that. You don't need them to treat you a certain way to feel confident in who you are and feel that you're loved. So that was the biggest thing for me, was then when I realized I was loved and I had everything, I realized my mom was too, right? So it shifted my perspective. But now, I think we're growing in relational intimacy, rebuilding some of that trust, but I no longer carry that anger, and I think that anger drove me to try to overachieve. It drove me to unhealthy relationships because I hadn't grown through these things. And so, I mean, it was a life-changing event, but yeah, I lived a lot of my life in unforgiveness. And I think a lot of people do too. I think God always makes a way, but ultimately, like, those things that I said, I think could be pretty life transforming if we believe them.
Man, it's so amazing what you just said. And by the way, you need to go back and re-listen to that over and over and over again. Even as I'm listening to that, I'm just thinking, man, like, just thinking of the belief that someone has taken something from me, and that feeling of going, well, gosh, like, at the end of the day, like, it was never mine to begin with. Like, there's such power in that. And so, man, again, thank you so much, Michael, for jumping on, being a guest, sharing your story, sharing who you are and who you've become through this process of personal growth and development. I'm sure many people are going to go and follow you and continue to watch your success as you continue to grow and become a husband and a dad, hopefully one day, and all those great things. So thank you for jumping on. For those of you watching, I want to make sure to encourage you to like, subscribe to the podcast, and share this with someone who really needs to hear it, because the words that Michael said today were truly transformational. They're truly powerful, and they can make a huge difference in someone's life. So until next time, remember to be more, see more, and experience more than before.